Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is a special episode of Tailgate Trashtalk brought to you by Backyard Sports. We've got the college football playoff and plenty to talk about. Wrapping up championship weekend and, of course, diving into the controversial topic that is the Final Four team. You
13 weeks
did.
ago, the Texas was back. We'll save that for a later time. I'll let you all sit on that and stew and think about it, and then I'll give you the answer, the same one that I gave you 13 weeks ago.
Sounds good. Well, let's dive into it, man. Championship weekend starts out with Liberty against New Mexico State. New Mexico State, the team that's had upset Auburn just before taking on Liberty. A couple of weeks before taking on Liberty. Liberty covers pretty easily here, and they finish the season undefeated. They will get the Group of 5 New Year's Day invite. They get to play Oregon. What are your thoughts on Liberty and the fact that they have to face Oregon New Year's Day?
Yeah, so I mean, go Flames, right? I think it's awesome that they were able to pull off the undefeated season. I believe they finished with 22nd or
23.
20th. So they finished in the top 20, or excuse me, the top 25.
Yep.
It's awesome. It's a program that kind of went through a lot of turmoil here within the last 5 years. They're bringing Hugh Freeze. He does his thing. They get a quarterback drafted, which is pretty rare out of a small school here in Virginia. I would like to point out, though, that they are only receiving the opportunity to play Oregon because SMU did the bold thing and scheduled 2 out of conference games against big time opponents in Oklahoma and TCU. Had they not done that and they had won their conference championship like they did this weekend, they're probably playing Oregon. Again, not really to take away from Liberty's awesome season. The undefeated year is great, but I do value these smaller programs, scheduling out of conference games, scheduling up to try to play with the big boys. JMU kind of did that this year playing Virginia. But, again, shout out to Liberty. Had a great year. Congrats on the undefeated season, boys.
Yeah, for sure. Good for them. It is interesting, right, that they survived the transition from Hugh Freeze because it's not a traditional powerhouse school in terms of football. It's a religious focused school, and we don't always see those schools really come to the forefront when it comes to focusing on athletics. There are some, but not a ton. And they're a small school, right?
Yeah.
They're a very, very small school in a not necessarily college football rich state as well. When Virginia Tech is down, I think the state of Virginia is probably down on college football. So, that's one way to look at it. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe the Richmond Spiders move the needle for everybody, but
I will say though, for those that didn't get eyes on this game, I kind of had it going on. Truthfully, it was not on the main screen, right? There were other things on my prerogative at that exact time. The Liberty Flames quarterback was the entire offense for this team that day, Caden Salter. He went 20 for 25 passing for 319 and then carried the ball for 12 carried the ball 12 times for $165 and had 3 total touchdowns. Like, boy, if that's not putting on the performance of a lifetime in a conference championship game, that kid, shouts out to him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks, Mom.
Oh, look at you, Gary. This is a cutie.
Getting all cleaned up. All right, well, then we transition into some of the games that had some playoff implications. Oregon, Washington. Oregon was given up 9.5. I think we both agreed that was pretty egregious in terms of the number. Remind me, did you have Oregon winning?
I did. I thought Oregon was
not covering, right?
Yeah.
I had Washington money line. I knew it was going to still be a close game. I thought it would be a field goal game. I just thought Washington was going to get it by a field goal. This was an awesome game, man. Again, right, because they played a great game about 6 weeks ago, I think it was, and this was basically a repeat of that. Yeah. Washington had gone through that kind of swoon where they weren't great for about 3 weeks, and then they started to kind of figure things out on offense last week, and then this past weekend it looked like they kind of put it all back together against Oregon. I think the one thing that surprised me, and I want to get your thoughts on, is and maybe it didn't surprise me necessarily, but I think from a national perspective, people didn't know this about Washington. They were very physical up front and running the football. They've got a couple of talented backs in that backfield.
Mm-hmm.
I think it all gets lost in the sauce with Roma Dunze and what Michael Penix Jr. has been doing in terms of being in the Heisman conversation. Talk to me a little bit about kind of what this game, what really went into this game, because Washington, it felt like us also defensively, like there were times in this game where it felt like they were really pushing Oregon up front as well. They were very physical in this game, and I don't think a lot of people expected that.
Yeah, Dylan Johnson has been getting better and better as the year goes along. And a lot of credit to you. Almost every week we come on here and talk about Washington, and you're like, man, we know they can run the ball. And I've kind of laid off of that, like, because I wasn't super convinced. Johnson had that huge night running the ball against Southern Cal, and it was like, well, that defense can't tackle. And like everybody runs on them, right? But you kept at it. You were like, no, we know they can run the ball. And you said it going into that Oregon game as well. You're like, we know that they can run the ball. And I still was like, I don't know, man. That Oregon defensive front is really good, but Dylan Johnson comes out and all that man does is fall forward.
Yeah,
like he's explosive or whatever. He can take it to the house, but like when he gets tackled, he falls forward. It's like, oh, it's a 4-yard gain. No, that's like an 8-yard gain because that's what he does. He's a very powerful back, and credit to him. But at the same time, I think it was a huge like a late season acquisition almost for them to get Jace McMillan back.
Oh yeah,
who's their slot receiver who'd been out since like week 2, I believe.
Yep.
And he was the leading receiver in this game actually, because he's the guy that they're able to move in to send in motion pre-snap. They're able to line him up in different positions in the formation, right? To line him up near the line, in the far slot, in the near slot. Whereas Adunze is kind of he's their X receiver, right? Like he's the guy you line him up one-on-one in the corner and you throw in the 50-50 ball. So getting McMillan back was really huge for that offense. And like you said, their offensive line is really, really good and very talented. They're physical guys. I believe they're going to have probably a top 10 pick at right tackle over there coming out of Washington.
Yeah, he's projected in the top 10.
Yeah, like they just move people out of the way and they're freaking athletic as hell. And I heard someone mentioning, kind of talking about the season in totality. The play caller in Washington, the coach who's I can name 70 football coaches and I can never remember the Washington coach. And he has a very unique name. So I apologize for that. But so they were talking about his play calling, and I thought it was very apparent in this game. They just they're always in the right, they're always in the right play. They don't have like negative plays. They may get sacked or something. They may miss a throw, or so a guy gets tripped up in the backfield, but he's always calling the right play for the right situation, right? And I think it was very apparent this weekend. Like Oregon scores to go up like 24-20, I believe it was, with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. And it's like, oh man, they completed the comeback here. They're up going into the fourth. Like Oregon's going to milk this clock. But Washington never panicked. And from a play calling situation, everything worked for Washington in the fourth. Like they always had something going positively for them. And I think that's a testament to the play calling and the head coaching there. And Washington's going to be a bear for Texas.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of bear, Kalen DeBear or DeBoer.
Kalen DeBoer, that's what it is. Yes. It's so unique.
Sorry for the background noise. I'm not sure what the hell's going on up there. I think there's a vacuum running. So if you can hear it, I apologize. But you're absolutely right. It just seemed like when they needed a play, they could get a play, and it wasn't just one player, although McMillan was kind of the security blanket in a lot of situations. But there were a couple of balls to Rome that you mentioned it's 50-50 balls. I got to feel like Washington looks at that situation and says, like, that's like a 75-25 ball because that's who Rome is. But you're absolutely right? He's the guy on the outside that they're going to throw those balls up to, and it's a lot of times it's going to result in that explosive play. I thought in this game as well, right? You mentioned not panicking in the fourth quarter. We saw it in the previous game, the first matchup, where Washington got the ball late and Oregon just never saw it again.
Yeah.
Until there was not enough time to do anything with it, essentially. And they sort of did that here again in the fourth quarter, where they had long drives. And I don't think people would have thought that that was Washington's offense if they hadn't watched them throughout the season. But we saw several times throughout this season, they'd have 12, 13 play drives where they just milked a lot of the clock. It was dink and dunk with Penix, and it was Dylan Johnson especially, just 6, 7, 8 yards in a cloud of dust, and suddenly they're, inside the 10, and they go punch one in, and you're like, fuck, they just ran 7 minutes off the clock and scored a touchdown on us. So credit to them not panicking, especially when you seemed like you kind of had the game in hand at halftime. And then by the end of the third quarter, you're like, fuck, man, Oregon's got the lead?
Yeah.
What the fuck? And I'll be honest, like sitting in my recliner watching it, I'm like, man, is Washington going to be able to respond? Because you kind of feel that way when a team makes that comeback. And there was a lot of that conversation leading up to this that I think a good majority of folks that talked about this matchup thought Oregon was the better team. And they wouldn't be at fault for that, because the last month, Washington has looked a different way than they did against Oregon the first time, and Oregon has looked a different way than they did really against Washington, or at least they've kind of maintained but also kind of dumped on a few teams. So Oregon looked like the better team coming into this game. So I wouldn't fault people for thinking that way, but Washington said, not so fast, my friend. Not so fast.
Jalen McMillan is that receiver, not Jace.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the Alabama running back who didn't play this week.
McClellan. Yeah.
Jace McClellan.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on, and maybe the pivotal game of the weekend that really caused, I think, the controversy. At least this was the first domino to fall for the CFP controversy. Texas goes and absolutely lays a fucking burger on Oklahoma State. They were never in the game. I thought Oklahoma State was going to be able to run the ball and keep this thing close. I thought Texas would win, but by like a tug. They won by like 7 tugs, which is crazy. But they looked the part. And that was really, I don't want to spoil kind of what we're going to talk about with the CFP, but this was really the first domino that we identified for the weekend, because I think we were all in agreement that, certain teams win, they're in, right? Michigan wins, they're in. Washington wins, they're in. Oregon wins, they're probably in for avenging their only loss. That would maybe be a little bit nip-tuck, but this was it, right? Texas wins this, and then we've got a real conversation at 3-4, assuming Bama beats Georgia, right? That was always the thing going into the weekend, that like Bama just seems to want to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing.
Yep.
Talk to me about Texas and how good they fucking looked in this game, man.
God, I mean, it's back-to-back weeks, man. They've kind of put it together here late in the season after, similar to Washington, a rough stretch down the middle of their schedule, right? We talked about them probably should have lost to Kansas State, but K-State didn't go for 2 on the road.
TCU pushed them.
Yeah, TCU pushed them. Quinn Ewers missed time, and it's like, oh, can they survive this with Malik? It's like,
my dad's comment, I look good cleaned up too. Nobody liked my beard and shaggy look, I guess.
No, man, don't listen to the haters. But Quinn Ewers throwing for record yards in the Big 12 championship game is nuts. Obviously, we know that he's as talented as it comes in college football. But to see them put it all together in back-to-back weeks kind of gives you hope going forward if you're a Texas fan, that like, boy, we've got it. Like we completely understand what we need to do now, and we just got to make sure we get it all together on game day. It'll be cool to watch them play against Washington too, because it's a Sarkisian revenge game.
Yeah.
He got to start there at Washington as a head coach, and then they kind of shipped him off for being like a good program, but not a great program, right? And now he's got Texas looking as good as they have since like Mac Brown was there. Also, Ollie Gordon got hurt in this game, which really sucked. But I think they were already down. They were down 14 or 21 at that point whenever he got hurt, and it's like, well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Texas had already established that Ollie Gordon wasn't going to beat him.
Yeah.
And that was for me last week when we talked about this matchup. That was for me going to be the difference if Oklahoma State was going to be able to keep it close enough to cover or to beat the 14.5-point spread. Texas's defense, we talked about it kind of early in the season, and then later in the season, I think it was the offense that was struggling more than the defense, and maybe we lost sight of it. They are fucking big, they are fucking fast, and they are physical. They will hit you in the mouth, and they did it all weekend this weekend. I thought that, for all of the great praise that we can heap on Mike Gundy, for one, he's at his alma mater, right? He played football at Oklahoma State, came back to coach at Oklahoma. I believe he did his graduate assistantship or graduate, assistantship or whatever they call it in football at Oklahoma State, and came back and he was the head coach. He's been the head coach for now 2022, I think, years, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of time. He has taken a program in Oklahoma State that used to be like a flash in the pan. They'd get the Barry Sanders in and they'd have a good year and yada, yada. They are churning out NFL talent. They are churning out good seasons, repeatedly throughout his tenure there. I thought he coached very almost scared in this game. He confused me in a number of situations by it was decision making, it was play calling in some ways. And I know he's not the offensive play caller, but things are filtered through him in terms of approach and the game plan and yada yada. And of course, when you're the head coach, you're going to take flack for the failings, and you're going to get all the praise for success, right? I just thought, I don't know that it would have made a difference in this game because Texas, it felt like, had their ears pinned back and they were just ready to make a statement for the world to know, we belong in the CFP. But there were times when I just didn't understand what Oklahoma State was doing from an approach perspective. And maybe it was because they couldn't get the running game going with Ollie Gordon, and they expected to be able to get the running game going. And once that didn't work, maybe they just didn't have that plan B to go to. But I want to kind of get away from that because I don't want to take away from what Texas did, man. What they did on a showcase weekend in maybe the most important game in program history since VY against Reggie Bush, that was an impressive performance, and it got them into the playoff, obviously, by completing that. But what a performance. I mean, start to finish, they just dominated this game, and that's what it boils down to. They were able to run the ball, even with their top running back out. They were able to run the ball, be physical. And Quinn Ewers, like you mentioned, breaking records like crazy, dude. Most yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half. And they just shattered every Big 12 championship record, it seemed, especially offensively. So what a day, what a game. Texas announced they staked their claim to the college football playoff with that win for sure.
Yeah, they've got it all rolling right now. And like I tried to tell y'all.
Yeah, man. You had it a long time ago. Miami of Ohio and Toledo. This was a bit of a surprise from the final score. Toledo was favored by over a touchdown. This wasn't ever really even close. Miami of Ohio really kind of dominated. I know the MAC can be weird and the spreads can be weird and whatnot. Not a lot to take away from this game, though. Not a lot of implication for postseason play. Anything you want to highlight from this one?
No, I mean, Toledo goes up early in the game, right? And it's always tough when you take a lead as a favorite to kind of turn around and give it away. So that really sucks. But I mean, both these teams ended up 11-2. I mean, those are great seasons. I don't think that anybody's obviously you're upset losing your conference championship game, but I mean, finishing 11-2, I think both these fan bases are probably pretty ecstatic with that. Especially a Miami of Ohio team that is not historically like a powerhouse in football, right?
Right.
They're a splash franchise every once in a while, but to win a conference championship and finish 11-2, that's pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Boise, UNLV. Boise ends up covering in this. It wasn't a real impressive game from either team. Again, not much implication for the postseason. Any takeaways from this one?
Not really. I mean, Boise winning by 24. You said it's not very impressive. You win by 4 scores. That's impressive to me. or three scores, I guess, 24 points. Yeah, I mean, again, it was one of those where I had the game on, I didn't have a lot of eyes on it, truthfully, but good for them. Shout out to Boise State.
Yeah,
and Kellen Moore.
Yeah,
his alma mater there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, winning by 4 scores is a big deal for sure. All right. Then we get into what really sparked all the controversy this weekend. Once Texas had won, and once the assumptions were made that Michigan and Florida State would hold serve, Alabama ends up winning on the money line, not just covering the 6 points, but they looked really good, man. And I know the game ended up a close game, but Bama kind of milked time down the stretch as well. Fucking Christ, that offensive line is good.
Yep.
Holy cow. And I know Georgia's lost guys to the NFL on that defensive line. However, they've got a bunch more NFL guys on that defensive line. And Alabama's got 3, I believe, true freshmen on their offensive line, including bookend tackles playing on the offensive line. And I believe they're starting a sophomore and a junior at the other 2 positions. So very, very young in terms of that offensive line. And I'm going to give you all of the credit when it comes to this, because you were the first to say it this year. You highlighted it in week 3 when I believe actually it was the Texas loss, after the Texas loss, that you said, and I quote, Nick Saban is the best coach in college football in terms of player development. And you said this Alabama team by the end of the season would be a different team than we saw in the loss to Texas and the struggle to USF. Peacock a little bit, bud. You nailed it. They are a different fucking team than they were then.
They very much are. I'm looking at their roster right now. Of all of the offensive linemen that is on the official Alabama roster, they have 2 seniors and 1 junior. Everybody else that plays offensive line, whether you're a starter or come off the bench, you are a sophomore or a true freshman, to include, like you said, the bookend tackles, which both came into camp over 350 pounds. Those are some big boys down there in Alabama. And they do not back down from anybody. You talked about Georgia losing defensive linemen to the NFL. You know who also lost defensive linemen to the NFL? Alabama. I respect the hell out of what Georgia is doing, and everybody talks about, was it like 28 players in the last 3 years or something like that on the defensive side of the ball? Got it. Check. How many has Alabama lost in the last 10 years, dog? Like, it does not matter to Nick Saban. You want to change coordinators, rotate rosters, quarterbacks, freaking, they don't have to be a wide receiver. Got it. We're just going to come out here and win the SEC championship, man. It's not a big deal.
We're going to let everybody know that Isaiah Bond's kind of good as well.
Yeah, 100%. Isaiah Bond's great, man. Jermaine Burton, that dude is a 50-50 machine. I told you guys last week going into the game that Alabama plays well in Atlanta.
Yep.
And I was right.
Yep.
I was absolutely right. I did think Georgia was going to win this game. I did. I thought the difference would be at quarterback. And it almost was. I mean, Carson Beck had a really good game. They didn't score touchdowns, right? Like that, to beat Alabama, you have to score touchdowns. And Carson Beck was not able to get them into the end zone as much as they needed to beat an Alabama team that, like you said, got the ball back and was able to run the clock down. Mm-hmm. So all credit to Alabama and those boys down there. Tommy Rees Tommy Rees has changed the perspective of Jalen Milroe more than maybe any quarterback in college football that I can remember in recent history. Right? This was a kid who got benched at the USF game for a quarterback who is now entering the transfer portal in lacrosse to go play at Notre Dame. Like, he got benched for a lacrosse player, bro.
Yeah. He made such a comeback that he forced his backup to change sports.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And he's we talked about this after, oh man, what game was it? Was it the Ole Miss game? I don't remember exactly. I believe it was the Ole Miss game where, like, he uses his legs to set up the throw.
Oh yeah.
but he also uses his legs to set up the run.
Yeah.
Where he scrambles out of the pocket, pump fakes, and then just takes off. And people respect his deep ball and ability to throw the move so much that they have to stay locked in their passing lanes. And if you have man-to-man coverage on this kid, forget about it because he's outrunning a linebacker.
One is none.
Yeah, like we saw it in the freaking the end of the Auburn game.
Georgia had 2 spies on him.
Well, yeah, that as well. Georgia played 2 spies on him a lot in that game, and it just didn't matter. I mean, he only ran for 29 yards, but like he's using his ability to set up. A couple
of them were pretty crucial runs. He converted a couple of first downs, and he didn't have the big gaudy yards, that's for sure. But
doesn't
2
matter.
spies, it's hard. But then you're trying to cover with 5, and then you can only rush a couple, right?
Yep, doesn't matter. Alabama finds a way, man.
Yeah, for sure. Kirby Smart said it too. He says, what did he say? He defies spies. It was a rhyme. I had to remember what the rhyme was. He defies spies. And there was a reason that he used plural because Georgia was using 2 spies very frequently in that game. I know Herb Street, I believe that was the crew that did the game. Herb Street was highlighting that quite a bit.
It was the CBS crew.
Oh, you're right.
The last one they have.
Yep. But they were highlighting that they had 2 spies on him quite a bit, and he was still able to. You said it right. Like he gets out of the pocket, he's not necessarily immediately going to run, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's capable, and he threatens you with the run, but he is keeping his eyes down the field, looking to throw. And for a guy that's a dual threat but that good with his feet, those guys don't always keep their eyes downfield. So whatever Tommy Rees has done with him and the quarterbacks coach there, what they've done with him throughout the season has definitely paid off for sure. Bama was able to run the ball right at Georgia too. And that was one thing I thought we'd see a lot more, like zone reads and read option plays with Milroe and trying to figure out whether it was, going to be getting on the edge or if they were going to be able to start baiting some of the defensive ends to stop crashing, that sort of thing. Bama was able to just turn around, put it in the belly of the running back, and get downhill. And that offensive line did yeoman's work in this game to open those holes and really gash the Georgia defense quite a few times with the run game. Those long drives that they had as well, those are exhausting. You mentioned quarterback play, and I want to highlight a couple of things, right? What separates good quarterbacks from great quarterbacks is exactly what you said, right? Cashing in when you're inside the red area, especially high red inside the 10, inside the 5, and they didn't in this game. And there were a couple of times that Beck missed a guy and they were inside the 20, once inside the 10, once that one time the dude was standing, I think it was even Bowers, don't quote me on that, but it was a wide receiver standing in the end zone basically by himself, and Beck just kind of progressed past him, and they ended up settling for a field goal. The other thing that quarterbacks do is get you out of jams, and that was what Stetson Bennett was able to do for the last 2 years for Georgia, that Carson Beck either hasn't figured it out or he doesn't have it in him to really find a lane and run. He doesn't threaten much with his legs. He also doesn't really progress through the offense very quickly, which is something I think you learn over time. Stetson Bennett was like 50 by the time he got out of Georgia, but
and
sorry,
the NFL.
I know that's a slight exaggeration, but
yeah, he and JT Daniels are now at the retirement home together.
Yeah, for sure. But that's something I think that it's going to have to come with Carson Beck's game, or Georgia's going to continue to struggle in these nip-tuck games. They got away with it a lot this year, and we talked quite a bit about the fact that like Georgia didn't cover many spreads this year. They had big numbers, but it just seemed like they couldn't get the offense maybe out of the mud or something. And maybe it just as simple as that Beck, maybe he doesn't quite have full grasp of the offense, or he's not comfortable enough in the offense yet. As we move into next season, I'm going to be curious to see whether he grows or if we start to see maybe a changing of the guard there in Georgia, because he's a young guy, right? And you would expect him to be a starter for at least 2-3 years. But if they're going to continue to struggle on offense, you might end up seeing a little bit of a change there, because he struggled when they were backed up against their own goal line too. A couple of bad throws there that really flipped the field and allowed Alabama to really continue to play the field position game.
Yeah, you mentioned that Alabama was able to run the ball. They really controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides.
They really did.
it was no more apparent than Alabama closing out this game, and they got the ball with 2:52 left on the clock, up 3, and the game ended then. Like Georgia didn't get the ball back.
Georgia never sniffed it.
I mean, that's not something you see from a Kirby Smart team very often.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially with college clock rules as well, that you're able to run that clock out, and yeah, that was very impressive for sure. Tulane finishes the season on a low note.
Boys,
Smooth finishes their tenure in the conference on a high note because they are transitioning to the ACC next year. Man, Green Wave, they just never really got into this one. That's all. I watched a little bit of this. It was on, kind of in the same slot, and the times I turned it just felt like they just couldn't quite. And Pratt had a shot late, but never really got the offense going to even threaten at all. Man, what a disappointing finish to the season for Tulane. Congrats to Smooth, though. Big win for them on their way out of the conference and heading to the ACC. We'll see how they do over there. I don't think it's much of a step up in competition anyway, so they'll probably do okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, ACC fans. But
Tulane, who had this offense that we were all kind of highly touting coming into the season with Pratt, didn't score in the final 22 and a half minutes of this game. And that's really just unacceptable from a team that I had high expectations for coming in.
Same.
It's a bummer to see them go out that way. I mean, they finished 11-2 and 8-0 in the conference, so like it's not obviously that's a successful season. Willie Fritz did a heck of a job, has done a heck of a job with that program. But yeah, it's a bummer to see them go out that way, scoring only 14 in the title games. It's really not what you want.
Yep. Yeah, I thought to start the season this might be the Liberty and the Group of 5 representative, not Liberty. Tough go. App State, Troy. I kind of made this pick figuring App State's always tough. Troy's better than I gave them credit for. I'll be honest, I didn't pay a ton of attention to Troy this year, but watching some of the highlights from this game, Troy's got some guys. They can play. I didn't expect them to knock off App State. I would have been curious to see JMU with a shot in this game, but Troy just they kind of put it on App State in impressive fashion because App State ain't to be trifled with, and they've proven that time and time again in these big games. But hats off to Troy, big win for sure.
They get Duke now in the bowl game.
Yeah. All right, one of the other two big ones in terms of playoff seeding. I don't think we ever thought this was going to be close. It didn't end up close. I think the only question mark was whether or not Iowa would get a point. They didn't. So if you parlayed the under half a point for both halves, like I did, yeah, you got a little bit of a payday. It wasn't a lot of juice, though. Vegas didn't have much confidence in Iowa either. So it only ended up parlayed. It was like plus 205 or 210, if I remember right, for the payout. So that's for anybody out there to wager a shutout should be a lot more juice than that. That tells you everything you needed to know about Iowa going into this game against Michigan. Thoughts about this, though? Michigan heading into the college football playoff. This game really showing how much they can control a game. Iowa's not a defense that you just push around, and Michigan was able to run the ball a bit once they got going. They did struggle early. The special teams got them their first touchdown of the game, and I think that was when everything kind of opened up a bit for them. But Michigan, much to take away from this game in terms of the playoff, or kind of ho-hum, this is what we expected?
Yeah, Michigan, similar to the Ohio State game, they just weren't. They don't impress me. It's like the old country song. You don't impress me much.
Yeah, Shania, yeah.
It's just they forced 3 turnovers on defense. Awesome. It's Iowa. They don't have an offense. Iowa's the wild thing about Iowa is that their most explosive player with the ball in his hands is their kick returner who plays defense for them.
Yeah.
Why?
Why not move him over to wide receiver or get him in the backfield or something?
Make him your Deebo Samuel. Do something with him. You remember Denard Robinson, the guy who used to play for Michigan. Basically a Wildcat quarterback.
Just put the ball in his hands. And let him figure it out. Let Shoelace figure it out.
Yeah, let him do something. I just don't. In this game especially, like I don't understand. I haven't understood all year long what I was doing on offense, but this is a game that Michigan probably should have made more of an effort to come out and make a statement in. After obviously it worked out, they're the number one team in the playoff, but like if you're really trying to instill confidence in folks, you're playing the Big Ten West, dude. They suck. So come out and do something. Put on a show.
Yeah, so bad. Yeah, I mean Iowa. You could almost treat it like the way Florida used to treat Percy Harvin as well.
Yeah.
Just get the ball in his hands.
Yep.
Yeah, Iowa's they're a disaster.
It'll be different next year.
Yeah.
New offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it'll be really different.
At least they have a great punter, punting for 353 net yards.
Yeah, ridiculous. Then we close out the weekend with ugly football. Florida State ends up winning 16-6 over Louisville. Louisville, oh man, they've crushed me all year. So I'm not happy with them to begin with. They have just killed me. No matter which side of a Louisville game I've been on, they've done the opposite. I've wagered on them a couple of times. They've lost outright. I've wagered against them a couple of times. They've covered. So, again, I picked them to beat Florida State this weekend, and they came out and laid maybe the worst egg of the year. Like, Jack Plummer, they should change his jersey to Bummer. Like, that dude looked terrible this weekend. And I know Florida State's got a fast defense, but there were so many times on the broadcast that they would highlight, like, this dude's running all by himself down the field, and Plummer's throwing to the other side of the field, or Plummer had a chance to tuck it and get some yards with his feet, and he didn't. And it just felt like Louisville just never really got up and got into this game offensively. Defensively, it's hard to tell. They did harass Brock Glenn quite a bit. They were able to get into the backfield, but Brock Glenn was also holding on to the ball really long, looked very indecisive. He looked like the third-string quarterback on a college football team. I know he was kind of highly regarded as a recruit, but he didn't look the part this weekend. And there's a reason that Rodemaker was the backup over him. Maybe they'd have looked better with Rodemaker. I don't know. They looked really bad. The only time they ever got anything going is when and his name is eluding me right now, but when they gave the running back direct snaps in the Wildcat.
Tuafili,
yeah. When they gave him direct snaps in the Wildcat, they were able to move the ball, and that was the only touchdown drive they had in the game.
Yep.
If they'd have done that more, maybe they could have made some more plays. But it was clear to me that Florida State coming into this game knew that they were going to be able to stifle Louisville's offense. I think they paid the price for their own hubris, though. And we're going to talk about it with the CFP stuff in a minute. But I thought coming into this game, Florida State wanted to make a statement and win this game in the 20s. They wanted to be in the 20s offensively to show the committee and show the nation, like, we're okay without Jordan Travis. And they did not do it. It was ugly football from start to finish. What are your thoughts on this game?
I mean, the number they should have been aiming for was 59.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Cardale Jones and Ohio State did to Wisconsin when he was the third-string quarterback. That was never in the cards.
No.
They scored 3 points in the first half,
Yeah.
and 16 points for the game.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it off the rip. Ugly football Saturday night.
Yeah.
Now, ugly football is still football, and I will still watch it because in June I'm gonna miss the shit out of it.
Yep. I was still glued to it.
Yeah, but
bitching about it, but I was glued to it.
Yeah. I mean, it just is a real shame. And again, we'll talk about this a little more, but it's just a shame that Jordan Travis went down, man. Because this had to be the best defensive performance they had all season, right?
Yep.
Those boys were tuned up, ready to go. And they just had, your quarterback throws for 55 yards. Like, that's against the defense that Drew Leary kind of lit up.
Yeah.
The week prior.
Yeah,
it's like, man, that's tough. Florida State, I mean, they suffocated Louisville. Louisville stood no chance. Jack Plummer played terribly. They got no rushing game going whatsoever. It was over before it started, truthfully.
Yep, for sure. All right, man. Well, let's transition into it. Let's get to the main topic of the week, the one that's got everybody talking. The CFP Committee has made their final selections, and their top 4 is as follows. If you've been in a hole for the last few days, number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Washington. Number 3, Texas. And I don't think there were a lot of surprises with that. But where the surprise maybe for some people comes in, and the real controversy, Alabama at 4, Florida State at 5, and then Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Missouri, and Penn State to round out the top 10. Liberty down there at 23 is the only undefeated group, or the most highly rated undefeated group of 5, right? That's the qualification.
Yep.
Is to get into a New Year's Bowl, the highest rated undefeated group of 5 team. So they will face Oregon. But outside of that, the most important thing to talk about here is, did the committee get it right?
Yeah, they did. The committee's job is to find the 4 best teams in college football to play in this New Year's Invitational. There's been a lot of hand wringing, a ton of there's been rumor of Florida State boycotting the Orange Bowl, which I believe is contractually illegal for them.
Yes,
but
they cannot.
Whatever. That they could send all freshmen.
They should, or could. I mean,
they could. They should try to go out and beat Georgia. Is what they should
go out and try to beat Georgia by like 3 touchdowns if they think they can do it.
But they can't. So, good luck. We just talked about how terribly they played. Now they will probably play Tate Rodemaker.
Yeah.
He'll be out of concussion protocol by then. But yeah, the committee got it right, man. Like what everybody wants to see is the best 4 teams play. They absolutely got it right. Texas, as I mentioned, is one of the best 4 teams. Washington probably should have been number 1 in the rankings, and I have a conspiracy theory as to why they're not.
We're going to get to it.
Michigan, they've been consensus number 2 all year long, right? Now, I know Ohio State jumped to 1 and whatever. They've been a top 2 team all year long. They were a top 2 team last year. Like, you can't knock them out. And they all won this weekend. And then Alabama won this weekend. They knocked off the back-to-back defending national title champions. They won the SEC. They're ascending. They escaped Auburn, which is always a crazy place to play in the Iron Bowl, right?
Yep.
They deserve to be in the playoff. Their only loss is to a playoff team. I don't think there's any argument for them to not be in the playoff because, like we mentioned earlier, Jordan Travis broke his leg. There is a clause in the bylaws and the criteria that the committee uses that accounts for missing key players. That was a missing key player. Now, there are some scenarios in which Florida State may have gotten in, which, for the record, I would have been okay with. If they had chosen to put Florida State at 4 and move Alabama out, I would have been okay with that because Florida State deserves to try to play for a national title. They would not win. They would get absolutely smoked by Michigan, but they played the season. The games matter, right? They have to matter, which is why I think the 12-team playoff is so fucking stupid because it diminishes the value of regular season games.
Yep.
So games matter. So I would have been all right with Florida State being in. Now, what I don't hear a lot of people, Georgia and Oklahoma were supposed to play week 0.
Yep.
But the NCAA nixed that because Oklahoma is moving to the SEC. What throws a whole freaking wrench into this entire thing is if Georgia beats Oklahoma, like we kind of assumed that they would, then Oklahoma would already have a loss going into the Texas game. And then if they proceed to beat Texas, that would give Texas 1 loss, but also a win over Alabama. So the big thing for Texas was like, yeah, they lost to Oklahoma, but they beat Alabama and they won their conference championship. Well, what if they're a 1-loss team who lost to Oklahoma, who lost to Georgia, who lost to Alabama, who lost to Texas? In that scenario, everybody has the 1 loss except for Oklahoma, who beat Texas. They would have had 2 losses at the time, or 3 if you want to count the Oklahoma State, right? So that would have been a 3-loss Oklahoma team who beat Texas. So does Texas still get in because they'd be a one-loss Oklahoma or a one-loss team, conference champion, but to an Oklahoma team that has 3 losses. And then does Alabama get on off the merit that they beat Georgia, right? Like, I don't know, because they would have had to loss to Alabama, who lost to Oklahoma, who has 3 losses on the season. Like it because Georgia and Oklahoma didn't get to play. There's a whole aspect of this that is just kind of tossed out the window. That because the NCAA is just wretched and awful and wouldn't let teams play, they missed out on a whole lot more of discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I'm with you. They got it right. Right. And I've heard a lot of arguments, a lot of them surrounding money, a lot of them surrounding TV ratings. All right. I'm here to tell you that the ad dollars have already poured in. It doesn't matter who's in the national semifinal. I'm also here to tell you that in 2023's playoff, at the conclusion of the 2022 season, there were 2 games. One of them featured an SEC team and one of them didn't. And the one that did a higher number in terms of rating was the one that didn't feature an SEC team. And it featured a TCU team that is not historically a team that moves the needle. It did feature Michigan. I'll give you that. Good fan base. But Georgia and Ohio State were the other game. And that game still beat the game with Georgia and Ohio State. The Michigan TCU game beat, in terms of rating, beat the Georgia and Ohio State game. So all that goes out the window. One, they're not bribing the fucking committee. Let's chill out with that stuff. Like, they don't have to. Bama's the better team. 2, it's not about TV. People are still going to tune in. There's nothing to do in January when they're playing these games. The NFL isn't playing playoff games on the same day as these games. Like, there's nothing else to tune into. Everybody's tuning into these fucking things. So it ain't about the TV dollars. Those ad dollars are already sold. They get sold when the games get announced in terms of their dates, and people are already dying, pouring over themselves to get into these games. What this amounted to is that the CFP committee has, as you already mentioned, they've got a charter and they've got criteria that they have to follow. The other argument I keep hearing is undefeated Power 5 champion. Do you know what's not in the CFP committee's charter? The
P5.
term Power 5 is not at all in the CFP's charter, at all, when it comes to evaluating who gets in to the national semifinal. So I don't know what argument's left, because yes, they're an undefeated school. Are we just going to put Liberty in then? Why is Liberty left out? They went undefeated. They won all their games that were in front of them. Then you hear people say, well, Florida State plays in a better conference. Fine, right? But let's not forget, Florida State has a strength of schedule near the bottom half of college football. 55 is their strength of schedule. And Alabama has a strength of schedule of 5. They are separated by 50 teams between Alabama and Florida State in terms of strength of schedule. They are separated by 0 teams in terms of strength of record, because Florida State's 3 and Bama's 4. But they're separated by 50 teams in terms of strength of schedule. And they had the best win of the year. They beat number 1 Georgia.
Yep.
They beat everyone's consensus number 1 team in Georgia. And we all know there's recency bias. You mentioned the Cardale Jones game. There is recency bias, and it is sort of in the charter. They have language in the charter that says a loss early in the season is not an eliminator, because they are allowed to use the eye test to say that a team is demonstrably better in week 13, 14, championship weekend than they were early in the season. And that's what we have here. And you already mentioned it. They do have language in the charter about an injury to a major impact player.
Yep.
And there's no arguing Jordan Travis is that. He's a Heisman contender. He's the best player on that team. He's the guy that moves the needle. He's not on that team anymore. They are a different team without him. And Alabama is a different team than they were when they lost to Texas. So all of that, if we're going to stick to criteria, they got it right, man. And by my eyes, they got it right. Those are the 4 best teams in the country. They got it right. Period.
Yes. I think that Washington should have been number 1. I think that Washington's win over Oregon was more impressive than Michigan's win over Iowa. I think that Washington played in what was definitely a better conference than the Big Ten and turned out to be probably the most competitive conference in the country this year. When the SEC broke it down, it was really just Georgia and Bama. It was kind of a down year for like the middle teams in the SEC this year, and an up year for the now deceased Pac-12. RIP to them. But I think the argument can be made, and I think it's correct to say that Washington probably should be the number 1 team going in. However, if there is anyone who's been living under a rock for this entire college football season,
strap in, boys. Strap in.
there is a story and a saga, truthfully, maybe my favorite college football scandal story of all time, surrounding one Jim Harbaugh and sign stealing and what he knows about it and what he didn't know about it. Also, couple that with the NCAA ban at the beginning of the season for 4 games, right? Because the one at the end of the season involving the sign stealing was self-imposed. So he didn't coach for 7 games, 7 out of 6, right? So 7 and then 6 to get to 13. So more than half the season he did not coach. That's a bad look for the NCAA. It's a bad look for the Big Ten. It's a bad look for college football, right? Who is on this committee of teams choosing these playoff teams? It's former coaches. It's current ADs. It's former ADs. It's all of these teams that Jim Harbaugh has potentially been stealing signs from. So if I were to go to each one of these 3 playoff teams not named Alabama and ask them, said, hey, who's rank the teams that you don't want to play in this playoff? I think that all of them would say Alabama is the team that they do not want to play. So, that being said, if you place Washington at the number 1 seed, that puts them in a bowl game on New Year's Day against Alabama. The committee did not like that. The committee said, let's make Michigan and John Harbaugh number 1 so that they have to play Alabama and Nick Saban in a college playoff game in the semifinal round. I think that's what happened. Nobody wants to see Alabama and Nick Saban walk through those doors. And that's what Jim Harbaugh is facing coming off of this suspension.
I love it, man. I love it. That when you hit me with that earlier today, ooh, man, it gave me goosebumps. Like, oh, dude, this is so perfect. So perfect. And if that's not the most petty but also genius way to get back at old Coach Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines for all of the nonsense, the countersuit that they threatened with.
Yep.
Man, that seems like there's some legs there, man. There's some legs there.
I'm just throwing it out there.
From Michigan's reaction that they didn't want to play Alabama. If anybody caught the video, you can hear the groans when Alabama's logo pops on the screen during the selection committee or the selection show. And a collective groan from Michigan, and then like a half-hearted, like, woo.
Yep.
We got to put on a show. And then the reaction from Alabama, very workmanlike, very much, we've been here before. We're ready. We're ready for this. And you know that Saban had these boys all year, remembering that last year they missed it by 5 points.
Yep.
2 losses by less than one by a field goal, 1 by 2 points. Or 1 point. I'm sorry, 1 point.
It was a 3-point swing.
Yep.
All season long.
All season long.
Both on the road.
That cost them the playoff. You know they were motivated, and you know they were ready for this. So.
Yep.
For sure.
Boy, I'm excited.
Darren, Georgia is one of the best teams in the country. I think we all agree that the thing for them is that, unfortunately for them, 3 other undefeated conference champions.
2.
3, right? Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. 2 got in. But there were
Oh
three
yeah,
total.
if you're counting Florida
Right.
State, yeah. Sorry.
There were 3 total, and you can't I don't think you can justify a 1-loss non-champion over an undefeated champion. So,
Right.
Unfortunately for Georgia, I think in most years of the college football playoff, Georgia's probably the 4 seed. Most years, because we haven't really had this situation. One, we've never had a undefeated Power 5 champion get left out, but also we've never had this many undefeated teams at the end of the year when it comes to slotting the top 4. So
Yeah,
I think
if Oregon beats
Georgia probably
Washington,
gets in.
if Oregon beats Washington, then Georgia's probably in, and the Pac-12 is probably gone.
I think they could have found a way to justify that. Yeah, I think you might be right there. You might be right for sure.
I think that's the only scenario. Or if Alabama had beaten Texas and then Alabama beats Georgia in the conference title game,
And
one loss,
and it's Georgia over Florida State instead of Alabama.
Well, yeah, yeah. Then you just have Then you have Michigan. Well, no, then you probably have Bama, Michigan, Washington, Georgia, and you get Bama, Georgia rematched in the first round.
Yeah. No, yeah, Dad, that's a good point, right? And I said that today when we were in the office talking about this. I'm normally the guy up here finding a podium, finding a microphone somewhere, finding a text message to send to somebody, finding a Facebook post to post to explain how the College Football Committee got it wrong. I was that guy last year when they put Ohio State in over Alabama because of how bad Ohio State looked in their loss and how good Alabama looked in their 2 losses, both on the road, both on last-second plays. I was that guy last year, griping and bitching because Ohio State didn't belong in. I was the guy the year Clemson got in with their loss, and I was griping and bitching because they didn't belong in. I'm normally that guy. This year, I got no qualms, and I think they got it right, honestly.
Yep. It's nice to see them go out with a win, you know?
Yeah.
Before they completely ruin college football for us
next
year.
Finish on a high note. So before we make our picks in the national semifinal games and the championship game,
let's flex a little bit.
We're going to rehash a little bit. And for the second time tonight, Bentley's going to be able to peacock a little bit, my friends, because our very first, the OG tailgate totem of the season, we did this in week 2, mind you. This wasn't week 8. This wasn't late in the season. This was week 2. This was the rankings that we had in terms of who we thought would get into the playoff. Bentley, 3 out of 4, man. 3 out of 4. I went 1 for 4, and we're not going to talk about 5 and 6 either. So we're not going to talk about 3 or 5 or 6.
Your boy knows some ball, dude.
Nailed it, bud.
Your boy knows some ball.
Yeah, nailed it.
What can I say?
I have to ask, what was it? I know we talked about this quite a bit early in the season, but what was it about Texas that really stuck out to you in terms of feeling like they were going to be a playoff team this year? Because for a long time, everybody in the country's asked, every time Texas gets on a little bit of a win streak to start the season, they get a big win over somebody, or last year when they pushed Alabama and nearly beat them, then they end up beating them this year. Everybody's always asking the question, is Texas back?
Yeah.
What made you think they were going to be back this year?
Yeah, I said it early in the year that like I have gotten sucked into the hype before, right? Like college football is better when Texas is good. It just is. But I really believed it this year, right? Because I'm watching them earlier in the year. The talent discrepancy on both sides of the ball for them was so apparent. Like they've got NFL guys on this roster that play on the offense and the defense. And both units of the ball are so complete, right? Mm-hmm. They have so much talent on both sides and they play so well that like I knew that, or I predicted, I assumed, however you want to say, right? My assumption was that if you have an offensive off day, the defense is there to carry you and vice versa, right? And that happened from time to time throughout the year where they got pushed. We mentioned the TCU game. We mentioned the K-State game. Sorry. But I knew that one side of the ball was going to be able to carry the team almost no matter what, right? And then we saw at the final 2 games of the season, they put it all together. Yep. And Quinn Ewers played the best he's ever played in the championship game. and they're playing as well as they have all season long, or in maybe 15 plus years, right, going into this playoff. But I just saw early in the year how balanced they were as a roster and how much freaking talent they had on both sides of the ball. And Quinn Ewers, second year in the system, you're betting on talent, you're betting on pedigree. The guy, he just looks like a different quarterback this year than we've ever seen him playing in college ball.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think my early trepidation was whether or not Quinn Ewers was going to be able to play steady ball. We've seen last year he had the game against Bama where he looked really good before he got hurt, and then obviously Bama was able to make the comeback. Mostly, probably, I think, if we're being honest, probably because Ewers didn't play the rest of that game. I think Texas probably holds on in that game, but we've also seen him with stinkers.
Yeah,
and I think that's why he didn't play at Ohio State. I think that's why he ended up back in the state of Texas. And I think that's why they struggled a lot last year at times, right? They had some issues on both sides of the ball, but I think Ewers was kind of the straw that stirred the drink. And usually your quarterback is, right? Like, that's not groundbreaking or earth-shattering news that, like, a quarterback moves the needle for a football team. But he also can be the reason that an offense gets stuck in the mud, right? And we've seen that from him. We haven't seen that a lot from him this year. There have been times, but as you mentioned it so perfectly, that they have a defense now that can make up for that. And that's what we saw against TCU. That's what we saw against Kansas State. And that's what we saw continue down the stretch into the final weekend of the regular season and the Big 12 championship game, is that defense is the real deal. And once the offense got back going, they're a monster. They are a force to be reckoned with. And that Big 12 championship game has to be kind of like right with what that team can look like when all things are hitting for them, because Ollie Gordon is the best running back in the country. I don't think there's not a big debate. There's a couple guys you can throw in right into that conversation, but in my opinion, he's the best running back in the country. They really made him look pedestrian before the injury, and it's unfortunate he got hurt. But that offense, that they weren't able to run the ball, and Ollie Gordon did not look the part of the best running back in the country against that Texas defense, and that's a credit to the Texas defense. That's not a knock on Ollie Gordon specifically. That's a credit to what that Texas defense was able to do, for sure. Complimentary football, man.
I mean, I think that they have the best duo.
I love your gumption, Robert. I love your gumption.
Yikes! Roll Tide, baby. SEC bring it home, for the kids. But no, I think Texas has the best interior defensive line in all of college football this year. Mm-hmm. They have two guys, Sweat.
Those two D tackles.
The other kid's name, I can't remember.
They're fucking space eaters.
Yeah, they're incredible. They move people. They take up all the space, like you said. They shed blocks. They tackles for loss. They crush the interior of the pocket on opposing quarterbacks. Like, they're freaking tough. And Penix, who is more of a traditional quarterback where he likes to stand in the pocket and throw from the pocket, might have his hands full with those two guys coming down the middle.
Yeah, we might be asking a lot of his legs this week. Well, not this weekend, but in this game. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to it, man. We strutted our stuff there with 3 out of 4. Well done. Let's get to it. National semifinals. We've got Michigan against Alabama, and we've got Washington against Texas. We'll start right from the top here in terms of the graphics. Texas against Washington, January 1st. It's the night game. It's the Sugar Bowl. Washington plays almost a de facto road game because the University of Texas is only a couple of hours from where the Sugar Bowl will be played, and Washington has to fly nearly halfway across the country. However, what are your thoughts on this game? Is Washington stand a chance here, or do you think Texas is going to continue to strut their stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about any of these games. All 4 teams stand a chance, right? There's not a definitive, maybe favorite. I know probably the very early lines are out, but I have not looked at them. So I have to assume that Washington is favored in this game, right? I don't know if Vegas is taking into account location, just based off of, like you mentioned, Texas being right down the road from New Orleans. But of course, Washington has a chance, man. They're undefeated. They beat Oregon twice. They ran the gauntlet in the Pac-12, which is considerably more difficult to do than the Big 12 this year, specifically. Penix, Heisman Trophy finalist. Like you mentioned earlier, specifically, their offensive line has been road grading for Dylan Johnson all year long. I mean, they have NFL talent at the receiving position. Their defense is probably better than people are giving them credit for. I know that Caleb Williams and the run game of the Trojans kind of lit them up, right? Shout out Marshawn Lloyd. But I have to imagine that Washington stands a chance in this game, right? But I'm going to go with Texas here to win the game because of what I mentioned earlier is they have NFL talent on both sides of the ball at every level. Yeah. And they, for my money, they have the more talented quarterback in this game. I think Quinn Ewers is a more talented quarterback than is Michael Penix. He didn't have the year that Michael Penix did. That happens from time to time. The Heisman Trophy winner, which Michael Penix may be, doesn't always prove to be the best quarterback, right? Like Johnny Manziel won a Heisman, not the best freaking quarterback. He just was the best player in college football, right? Like
Jason White won a Heisman.
Yeah, I mean, there you can go to. There's a litany of.
If anybody can name one NFL team he played for,
I just think that there's more talent from top to bottom on this Texas team, and I even told you this. I don't know if we said it on the show, but I told you this. I said that Alabama is probably the only team that can beat Georgia, and Texas is the only team that has the athletes and talent to play with both Georgia and Alabama.
Yep. So I meant to take a look at the early lines before we hopped on the show because we were kind of talking about it earlier in terms of like we're a month out really from these games, and we were curious what the lines would be. Texas is actually laying 4.
Oh wow!
I'm surprised by that number. I like you. I thought it would be 1.5. I thought it would be Washington 1.5.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't have been surprised if it was Texas 1.5. I am surprised that it's Texas 4.
Yeah.
But like you, this game, I think, for me anyway, more so than the other game, is kind of a coin flip. I think that if Texas is able to shut down Dylan Johnson, Washington's going to struggle because that run game opens up a lot of what they do on offense. Penix is really good with the play action. He's also a guy that wants to stand in the pocket. If they are able to collapse the pocket, especially from the inside, which is what they've been able to do so far this season against other teams, he's going to struggle because although he is very athletic, he hasn't been that guy since he was at Indiana. He has made a concerted effort, a conscious effort to be a pocket passer at Washington and only use his legs when it's like desperate times, right? Not fully desperate, but like in certain situations, he'll unleash his legs a little bit and make a play. I think injuries probably have a lot to do with that. His injury history, he's probably like, I need to be more cautious and stay in the pocket, which makes sense, right? Your best ability, you said it earlier, and I say it all the time on the NFL show as well. The best ability is availability. And that was probably part of his decision in terms of making that conscious decision to be more of a pocket passer. If Texas is able to collapse the pocket, if they're able to slow Dylan Johnson down, I feel like they could maybe even run away with this game if they're able to stop this Washington offense, because I think that Quinn Ewers is going to be able to score points against the Washington defense. The success I think Washington ends up having is if they can beat the DBs of Texas on the outside, big physical DBs, but they can be got in coverage. And we saw that against Oklahoma where they got them a few times in coverage. If Washington's able to scheme up things to protect Penix on the front and they're able to run the ball a little bit to keep Texas honest, we could see a bit of a shootout, maybe a 38-35. If Washington's going to win, it'd be 38-35. I could see Texas easily scoring 38 points on Washington as well. I'm going to do it, man. I'm going to go the other way. I like Washington. I like them a lot. I don't feel super confident in that pick, but I wouldn't feel super confident in picking Texas either. So I'm going to pick Washington in this game. I think they're being written off a little bit with that 4 line by Vegas. Vegas is usually right though, but they were also written off against Oregon. That 9.5 number was fucking disrespectful. And Washington proved how disrespectful it was by knocking off Oregon. So I'm going to go with Washington. I just like what they've got. I think that they're going to be able to score points. I think they're going to be able to protect up front.
Can I try to convince you the other way?
I'm always up for it. Always.
All right, so Texas's loss this year was to Oklahoma.
Yep.
Now, former Oklahoma quarterback, now transfer portal quarterback Dylan Gabriel. In that game, carried the ball 14 times for 113 yards and a touchdown.
He beat him bad with his legs.
Which tells me that Texas was running a lot of man-to-man coverage, right? Because that's typically where we see quarterbacks take advantage of it, right? The defense turns their back. Yeah. Yep. The game that they won against Alabama, Jalen Milroe only had 44 rushing yards, although he carried the ball 15 times, right? I don't know the exact defensive splits of how much zone per how much man was run, but it seems to me that they probably ran a little more zone in the Alabama game because Milroe is not known for his medium to short passing game, right? And they figure if we play zone, he's not going to beat us with his legs, and we're not going to let anybody get behind us, right?
Yep.
Now, we both just talked about how athletic Michael Penix is, but he likes to be a pocket passer.
He doesn't like to do it. Yep.
Exactly. And you talked about how freaking athletic and talented the DBs are of Texas, but they can be got in coverage.
Yep.
So why would they be got in coverage if they're dropping zone? Why, I'd just play man. Just line your boys up one-on-one. You're super talented DBs against these super talented wide receivers. You don't have to worry about about Michael Penix running the ball like you do Dylan Gabriel.
That's a fair point. Honestly, I think defensively, if you can scheme it up and you are able to keep Michael Penix in the pocket like he wants to, like I said, I'm not confident in the Washington. I wouldn't be confident in the Texas pick either, though. I think this one is very much a coin. I'm very surprised by the 4 number. I'm really surprised by that. But in the end, I'm picking money. I'm picking Washington to win this game. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think both offenses are going to get loose. I really do. I think that Washington, I trust in that offensive line. They've been able to do it. They did it against Oregon, who has a very talented defensive line. Now, Oregon doesn't have the D tackles that Texas has. If those D tackles are able to disrupt the backfield and move the line of scrimmage backwards, then it's going to be a long day for the Washington offense. And that's why I say defensively, if they are able to move the pocket into the lap of Michael Penix and those running backs, Dylan Johnson especially, and get hits on him in the backfield, then I do believe if there's a blowout in this game, it's Texas blowing out Washington, not the other way. Because I do think that Washington's going to be able to, or Texas is going to be able to score on Washington's defense with the way Ewers especially has been playing lately. But I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with it. It's maybe a gut feeling, but I like Washington. I've had their back even during the downtime. I've had their back.
Yeah.
And even against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, when I felt like a lot of, especially like national personalities, were writing Washington off in that game, I'm going to stick to it, man. I'm going to stick to it. Maybe it'll cost me like it did with Penn State, but I'm going to do it. Yeah, I mean, Dad, just from that, the upset is there for sure. At least the possibility from my eyes. All right.
I could be completely wrong, but I'm taking Texas. Yeah,
for sure. Little head-to-head battle on that one, because I think we're going to be in lockstep on the next one, but just a hunch. So Alabama, Michigan, and surprisingly, I just checked the early line on this one.
Yep.
Michigan, 1.5.
Yeah.
So Vegas has Michigan as a favorite in this game. Talk to me about this game.
Yeah, I mean, the line doesn't really. So the line makes sense. I understand why they made the line 1.5 to Michigan. I would have understood it much, much more had this been the first line we saw as opposed to the Texas laying 4 points, right? Yeah. That I understand less now that I've seen Michigan -1.5, right? I get it. Michigan's the number 1 team in the country. Alabama has a loss. I understand. I've had Michigan number 2 in my totem all season long. They haven't moved. It makes sense to me. I understand why they put the line there. Michigan's extremely talented. They haven't lost all year. They've been without their coach for over half the season. There's a lot of controversy, and they've kind of fought through it and been successful. They had good wins this year, or they had at least one good win this year. They won their conference championship game. It's not the most shocking thing in the world to me that they're 1.5 favorites. That being said, roll tide, baby. roll tide. Roll tide.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I had this conversation, and I know I sent it in one group chat. I can't remember if I sent it to you, so you're going to hear it again if I did. But I had somebody ask me the question of like, Michigan, Alabama, is Bama going to win by 3 touchdowns? Essentially, was kind of like the gist of it. Now, transparently, there's a bunch of Michigan fans in that group chat, and that was stirring the pot. So we have a lot of fun going at those guys about Michigan football. But I was serious in my analysis of it, right? In my response to the question. I do think Bama wins by a couple of scores, man. I do. And here's why. I have said at several points during this season that I think Michigan is the most complete roster in football. And I mean that as like they've got talent and depth at every position. They've got a good offensive line. They've got a good defensive line. They've got a good backfield. Maybe the only place that I think Michigan is elite is at the cornerback position. And that's mainly because of Will Johnson. And he's probably a top 15 draft pick. Maybe if he doesn't go in the top 15, he's in the top 25, right? In terms of draft pick, he's an NFL corner. He's a guy that's going to be a left cornerback in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
I think they're elite in the defensive backfield. I don't think they're elite anywhere else. And I think that's a problem when you play against an Alabama team who may not have as much depth as a Michigan at every position across the board, but Alabama is elite at a few places. They're elite at linebacker. They're elite in the pass rush. They're elite along the interior of the defensive line. That offensive line is now elite. I would not have said that 8 weeks ago, but I'm saying it now, that offensive line, what they did to Georgia, that was elite. Yeah. They're elite in the defensive backfield because old Governor Nicky is still coaching the defensive backs for that team.
Yep.
And I think they're borderline. They're not elite, but they are close to elite at wide receiver. Isaiah Bond and Burton have shown me a lot over the last 4 weeks that I think they are close. And I said it last weekend when we were talking about this game. I said, it seems like Bama's found their new like Waddle and Smith and in those combos that they've had at wide receiver with like Jones and Ruggs and not Jones and Ruggs, but either way. They usually have 2 wide receivers, right? They've been churning NFL wide receivers all over the place, and I'm mixing fucking generations of wide receivers. But
Smith, Ruggs.
Yeah, because Ruggs kind of bridged and then into
They had Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, and one other guy who I can't think of right now.
Mechie also.
Yeah, Mechie was really good.
Yeah, so they've been churning out NFL wide receivers, and it feels like Bond and Burton are kind of the next step in that process for Alabama. And they've got 2 running backs that are really good. They're not elite either, but they're really good. So for me, that's what it boils down to. I think that Alabama's defense is going to really give J.J. McCarthy a lot of problems. I don't think that they threaten Alabama at the wide receiver position the way that they need to. And they're going to be able to really kind of focus on stopping Blake Corum because he's the engine that makes that machine move for Michigan. And they've got the horses to do it. Yep. Michigan has an NFL offensive line. Alabama has an NFL defensive line and linebackers. And I think that, the way that Alabama is able to, they're more talented at those positions. They're not as deep in a lot of ways. Michigan has, I will not back down from my statement that I think Michigan is the most complete roster in college football. I don't know what has led people to think J.J. McCarthy's a first-round quarterback either. I think they're going to give him fits. And that, for me, that's why I'm on Bama, and I'm on Bama pretty heavy. I may even bet it an alternate line up to like 8.5. Honestly, I think they're going to win by 2 scores. So,
wow.
Yeah, I do. I just think this is a bad matchup for Michigan. I think Michigan knew it when they saw the logo.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Nobody wants to play Bama right now, but I think that they're a bad matchup, and I think they're gonna put it on Michigan a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with basically everything you said. The flag you plant in the ground, or would the foundation you build your house on, right, at Alabama has been that defensive backfield.
Yep.
Their secondary is always good. You look across the NFL for the last 15 years, and you just see you just see Alabama players everywhere, man. Clinton Dix, Xavier McKinney, freaking Pat Surtain, like the list goes on and on. Yeah, Minka Fitzpatrick. The list goes on and on, dude. It's just forever secondary players coming out of Alabama. And you said it's because Governor Nicky down there still coaches them boys, 71 years old, out there running drills with the DBs.
Running back pedal drills.
Yeah, I mean, there's no one better. He might do it in half speed, but he's getting his point across, right? And I do agree. Yeah. Aside from Roman Wilson, the receiving core from Michigan leaves a lot to be desired.
Yep.
I mean, obviously they have Loveland, who's a tight end, but the tight end position kind of a wash against the Alabama linebacking core.
Yep.
But I think that the secondary is really, really going to give fits, like you said, or issues. It's going to cause JJ McCarthy to double clutch the ball, to hold on to the ball, because his guys are just not getting separation, they're not getting open. And then you mentioned that NFL type defensive line that Alabama has, just causing havoc in the backfield all day. Zach Zinter is gone for the season. The all everything right guard for Michigan. He went down in that Ohio State game. Now they're kind of an O-line factory, so like they just kind of plug and play.
Yeah, 5 more guys.
Yeah, but anytime you lose an All-American on your offensive line, that's tough, no matter what. And yeah, I mean, if they can cause havoc in the backfield and force McCarthy to hold on to the ball or try to move outside the pocket, I think that the athleticism of Alabama is at a different level than it is in Michigan, and that could be cause for a long afternoon for one JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm also on Bama. If that point was not conveyed, I don't know if I would play it up to 8.5. I might play them up to like 5.5.
Okay.
6 being a key number.
Yeah.
If I think I would definitely play it to 2.5.
Yeah.
Win by a field goal. Because you're going to get juice there. Like, I don't know. I have pulled up here. Alabama 2.5. You're getting plus 116. 8.5. You're getting plus 280. Like, if you want to play it all the way up to like 13.5, say they win by 14, you're looking at plus 420. Like there's some juicy lines to be played here. Yeah. But I all of the, we said it at the top of the show, these are the best 4 teams in the country.
Yeah.
Like laying that many points with any one team in this group of 4 is, you got to have some real conviction.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I feel that way with Bama, just the way they match up. I think what they have in the defensive backfield is what Ohio State didn't. And when J.J. McCarthy was able to make plays against Ohio State, it was because Rome Wilson and they were able to get loose a little bit. It's not – I don't think that's going to happen against Bama. And I think that's what we saw with Georgia, right? They weren't able to do that against this team, and they couldn't exert themselves. So, and it's what we saw with Georgia last year, right? Against Ohio State and against TCU. They just were able to fucking suffocate. The defensive backfield was so good that they were able to let the defensive front just eat. And they were able to dominate. So I feel very similarly about Alabama this year against these playoff teams for sure.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, good episode. Good conversation about the CFP selection. They got it right.
Bowl season, baby. It's bowl season.
Bowl season, though, for sure. We're going to have some bowl games to talk about next week. I believe we get our first kickoff is Friday.
Soon.
Yeah, it's very soon. I've got the top 25 up right now, so I've got to scroll back. Let's see.
Bowls.
Saturday.
Beach Bowl.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern, Ohio kicks it off for us on Saturday.
We get Miami of Ohio and App State though.
Yeah. Both,
we also get my boy Diego Pavia, New Mexico State. They should have won the conference championship game, but Liberty pulled it out. So whatever.
Yeah.
we get sort of an interesting bowl game too on Saturday as well. UCLA and Boise State.
Yes. Conference
winner Boise State against the UCLA team that just saw their star freshman quarterback enter the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Great defense there. I don't know how many of those guys are going to be playing.
Yeah. And they're on the downswing at the end of the season too.
Yes. Yep.
Could be a feather in the cap of Boise State potentially.
Also, shout out our boy, freaking BK, Guns Up. Texas Tech plays Saturday night.
Yep. First weekend.
Yep.
Playing Cal.
I wish my team was playing in a bowl game. That would be sweet.
Yeah, that's brutal.
It's all right. JMU gets a bowl game. You know, but let the little boys come up and eat at the big table every once in a while.
Who'd they end up drawing?
Air Force.
That's right. I knew it was one of the So good for them. Good for them though.
Yep, for sure.
First season, the NCAA's hand kind of got forced, and the NCAA is such a fucking dinosaur.
Yes, it is.
They should have been in that conference championship game.
Yes, they should have.
Anyway, I appreciate you, man. Good conversation, and we'll have some bowl games to talk about next week.
Yep.
And in the lead up to the college football playoff, we got a couple of weeks here to prepare our final picks. We'll give you our final picks here as we get into the playoff. But it's bowl season. We're gonna see some fun bowl names. I always love some of the bowl names. The Beef O'Brady's and Duke's Mayo and
76 Birmingham Bowl.
76 Birmingham. Yep. Some really fun bowl names, some really fun sponsors. They do some cool stuff with them too. It's not just a name on the bowl. If you tune into any of these bowl games, there's usually some sort of theme or game at halftime that they do or something along those lines that are really neat with these bowl games. So they keep it a little spicy. I appreciate it for these lesser bowls that I'm going to be tuning into. Keep it spicy for me.
North Carolina is playing West Virginia in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I just want to recollect to the last time that North Carolina played in the Duke's Mayo Bowl.
Yep.
They fucking lost, boys. They fucking lost to Shane Beamer and them boys from Columbia.
Beamer ball got the win.
It was his last bowl win, but whatever. Not a big deal. Casual.
You beat Carolina, though, so.
Yeah. Yes, we did.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody in the comments. We always appreciate the engagement. Mom and Dad, thank you for tuning in. Darren, appreciate it. Robert, till next time, for Bentley and the rest of us here at Backyard Sports, this has been Tailgate Trash Talk. We are out.